On November 21, 2025, in Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin addressed the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and the role of a US-backed peace proposal. For the first time, President Putin confirmed that Russia had received a copy of the plan, which has been presented by the United States as a potential pathway toward ending the war that has raged for over a year. I believe that US plan can also lay the foundation for a final peace settlement, said President Putin during his remarks, suggesting that the proposal could provide the basis for a future peace agreement. This statement came after months of tension between the US, NATO, and Russia, as well as international pressure to find a resolution to the conflict that has caused devastating losses on both sides. The US proposal, which was reportedly shared with both Moscow and Kyiv, includes provisions for a ceasefire and long-term security guarantees for Ukraine. However, the details of the plan have been shrouded in secrecy, with the US government continuing to emphasize its willingness to mediate negotiations. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, however, has repeatedly voiced concerns about any plan that might involve territorial concessions or compromises on Ukraine's sovereignty. In his address, Putin expressed cautious optimism about the US initiative, though he also made clear his stance that any peace settlement would have to involve substantial gains for Russia. He further emphasized that the plan could only succeed if both sides agreed to engage in discussions, which to date has been a point of contention. If Kyiv does not want to discuss President Trump's proposal and refuses to do so, then both they and the European warmongers must understand that the events that occurred in Kupiansk will inevitably repeat themselves on other key areas of the front line, President Putin warned, pointing to the recent events in the eastern Ukrainian city of Kupiansk. Kupiansk has become a symbolic flashpoint in the ongoing conflict, as Russia claimed to have recaptured the city, which had been under Ukrainian control. The Ukrainian government has denied Russia's assertion, maintaining that the city has not fallen and that it continues to maintain control over the area. This contradiction between Moscow and Kyiv over territorial control has only intensified the geopolitical tensions. Putin's statement regarding Kupiansk signals that Russia intends to pursue further territorial gains if Ukraine does not agree to the terms of the US-backed peace plan. Russia's position appears to be that the military successes it has achieved, particularly in eastern Ukraine, will serve as leverage in any future negotiations. This tactic, according to analysts, is part of Moscow's broader strategy to weaken Ukraine's negotiating position and strengthen its own claims to Ukrainian territory. Russia is prepared to take further actions, and the events in Kupiansk are a precursor to what could happen in other key cities and regions along the front lines, Putin continued, adding weight to his earlier statement. The Russian president's comments are seen as a clear indication that Moscow plans to maintain its aggressive military posture unless its demands are met, reinforcing the notion that Russia is willing to take additional steps to secure its interests in Ukraine. The ongoing conflict has led to massive casualties, with tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians on both sides killed or wounded. Ukrainian civilians have borne the brunt of the destruction, with entire cities and towns reduced to rubble due to prolonged bombardment and fighting. The humanitarian crisis has escalated as more people are displaced, seeking refuge in neighbouring countries or in other parts of Ukraine that are less affected by the fighting. The international community, including the United Nations and several European nations, has expressed grave concern over the continued escalation of violence. Diplomats and foreign ministers have urged both Moscow and Kyiv to return to the negotiating table in an effort to bring an end to the war. Despite these calls, both sides have remained steadfast in their positions, making a peaceful resolution increasingly difficult to achieve. The US, under the leadership of President Joe Biden, has continued to provide significant military and economic aid to Ukraine. Washington has also placed heavy sanctions on Russia, targeting key sectors of the Russian economy, including its energy, defense, and financial industries. Despite these efforts, Russia has not shown signs of backing down and has continued to push for its territorial objectives in Ukraine. Putin's comments reflect a broader strategy by Moscow to undermine Ukraine's position and influence the outcome of any peace negotiations. By highlighting the capture of Kupiansk and warning that similar actions could unfold in other parts of Ukraine, Russia is sending a clear message to Kyiv and the West that it will not cease its military operations unless its demands are addressed. On the other hand, President Zelenskyy has been vocal about his refusal to consider any peace plan that would result in Ukraine ceding territory to Russia. he has consistently stated that any peace agreement must ensure Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Zelensky's position has been supported by many European leaders who have warned that rewarding Russia for its aggression could set a dangerous precedent and undermine international law. The United States, while still supporting Ukraine's stance on sovereignty, has also been pushing for a diplomatic solution. The Biden administration has reiterated that it is committed to helping Ukraine secure its borders, but also acknowledged the importance of finding a path to peace that could prevent further bloodshed. Zelensky, however, has made it clear that he sees no way forward that involves compromising Ukraine's territorial integrity. "We will not give up a single metre of Ukrainian land," Zelensky declared earlier this month, reiterating his stance on the matter. The Ukrainian president's words highlight the deeply entrenched positions on both sides, making the prospect of peace increasingly elusive. Putin's remarks also come amid rising fears in Europe about the potential for the conflict to spill beyond Ukraine's borders. While Moscow has denied any intentions to expand its operations into neighbouring NATO countries, the continued fighting along Ukraine's western borders has raised concerns about the possibility of the war escalating into a broader regional conflict. Putin's direct threat to seize more territory if Ukraine rejects the peace proposal adds a new layer of urgency to the situation. His warning about Kupiansk is particularly significant because the city is located in eastern Ukraine, an area that has been a major flashpoint in the war. The control of Kupiansk is seen as a strategic advantage for Russia, as it is located near key transportation routes and supply lines. As the conflict drags on, the economic consequences are also being felt across the globe. Global oil and gas prices have fluctuated dramatically due to the war, with European countries scrambling to find alternative sources of energy. The war has disrupted supply chains, leading to inflation in many countries and worsening the global food security crisis. The humanitarian toll of the conflict is similarly staggering. According to the United Nations, over 14 million people have been displaced by the war, and millions more are in urgent need of food, water, medical care and shelter. International aid organisations continue to operate in Ukraine and neighbouring countries, but the scale of the crisis remains overwhelming. In conclusion, the situation remains highly tense, with no immediate end in sight. Putin's confirmation that Moscow has received the US peace plan marks a significant development, but the path to peace remains fraught with challenges. Both Russia and Ukraine remain deeply entrenched in their positions, and the international community continues to search for ways to mediate a resolution that can bring an end to the suffering. The prospect of further territorial seizures by Russia adds a sense of urgency to the negotiations, but the key question remains whether Kyiv and its allies will be willing to make concessions for the sake of peace. The events that occurred in Kupiansk will inevitably repeat themselves on other key areas of the front line. President Putin's words ring as a reminder that the conflict is far from over and that both sides are preparing for continued hostilities. The international community will be watching closely as this critical moment in the Ukraine war continues to unfold.